Hello everyone, this is Richard. Welcome to another edition of Starfield Essentials. In this video I show how to build a Wolf class ship. This class of ship meets the following design requirements: 27 or greater light year jump distance, 6,000 kilograms of unmodified cargo capacity, 4 passengers, 6 crew, mobility in the 90s, particle beam as weapon 1, electromagnetic weapon 2, particle beam turret as weapon 3. I tried to build at one location. I like to have a Taiyo cockpit, and I want to try to minimize the levels. For the HABs that I like to include in this ship, I want to have a control station 2x1, an all-in-one berth 2x1, a living quarters 2x1, and a captain's quarters. The builder requirements for this ship is to have a character of level 60, that way you unlock all non-quest ship parts. You will probably need Starship Design 4. That gives you the ability to install experimental ship models. You'll want to have Piloting 4 to enable the piloting of Class C starships, and you're going to need at least 600,000 credits. This exact build cost me 563,682 credits. My Super 17 Skills plus level 60 character bat file accomplishes these prerequisites, and I'll have a link to that in the video description. I like having 4 empty passenger slots so I can take on missions like this. You can see that my passenger space is 0 or 4, and this mission requires 2. We're going to build this ship at New Homestead on Titan, and I'm going to use a Vagabond class ship as the base for it. I like to buy ships and then scrap them. I don't like to steal ships and then build upon those, because sometimes stolen ships have issues where extra crew appears, you find heat leeches, all sorts of issues that can simply be precluded, in my experience at least, with buying a ship legitimately. And this Vagabond is a fairly cheap ship that also has the Taiyo cockpit that I want. So the first thing we're going to do is completely strip this ship down. I will get rid of most of the parts because I simply won't need them. The only parts that I'll save are the cockpit, the landing bay, and the docker. The first step I'll take with this ship is to reverse the direction of the landing bay, and that way I have it connected to the cockpit. Next, I'll start placing the HABs that I'm interested in having in this build. I don't worry too much about having the HABs in the exact location. In other words, I might put the captain's quarters first and then swap it out later. My main goal at this point is just to get a sense of what the general outlook of the ship will be. Now that I have an idea of what that looks like, I'm going to start adding in cargo. I like to use these Galleon S204 cargo units because you can snap things to them. For example, I'm adding on these 700T HE3 tanks behind those, and I like to have a lot of helium so that I can go across the universe pretty easily. I also like these Nova bracers because they have a lot of snap points. Now I'm looking at grav drives, reactors, and engines, and depending on what's available at the site, that will drive my choices primarily for engines. I don't get too worried about exactly which engine that I'm going to use. In fact, I'll link to a video that's done some really nice analysis of which engines are best according to which definitions. Right here I'm trying for a 2-1-2 build, in other words 2 engines on the left, something down the center, and then 2 engines on the right. However, I end up changing my mind a little bit later because of the engines and the mobility that is offered. I don't really like it. Here I'm building the top of the ship where I put the captain's quarters and the Nova cowling, and now we get to the part which defines why I like to do this build at Titan. You can use these NG-20 landing gear, which I think are just the best in the ship. Here I'm putting in the docker, and this docker, I would like to use it underneath, however it throws an error because it's just a little bit too far down. At other locations in the game you can get the slim docker, so if you have an ability to do that, I recommend it. Also at this point in the build, I put the docker a little bit too far back. I will rectify that shortly once I have finished the rest of the construction. Here I'm putting my favorite Assurance SG-1800 shield generator. That'll move as well once I decide that I need to move the docker elsewhere. We're almost to the end of the build at this point because now I'm taking a look at weapons, and I like to have 4 PBO 300 weapons facing forward. These are particle beam weapons, and I really like them just for general destruction. These will be manually controlled, so I will use generally trigger 1 to fire these, and I like to have them as shown 4 facing forward. When I get to the point where I am deploying the turret version of these weapons, which fire on their own, I like to put 2 facing forward and 2 facing rearward. The reason is that the ship itself will fire them, so I don't have to worry about being able to see targets. So for example, here's a case of putting 2 of these weapons facing rearward to cover the aft quarter, and I will put 2 of these weapons facing forward to cover the bow. And I'm using the horizontal weapon plates to mount those. Now I'm at the point where I am going to add electromagnetic weapons, and I add 3 of these EMP-1000 to the top of the ship. I like to use these for boarding purposes. Now at this point I decided that I wasn't quite happy with the engines that I had chosen, so I started looking for some alternatives, and I originally went with a 2-1-2 deployment, and I decided that I was going to go with a 3-engine deployment as opposed to a 4-engine deployment. So I'm trying different engines here, trying to see which ones give me the best combination of jump range distance. For example, what I'm looking at here is jump range 26. That is not meeting my design requirement. I want to have at least a jump range of 27. I settled on these Poseidon DT230 engines, and because they are power 4, I could only use 3 of them. So as you can see, I'm moving these engines into a 1-1-1-1-1 formation, where I have 1 engine, a grav drive or reactor, 1 engine, a grav drive or reactor, and then the final engine. I ran into one problem though. I found out that the grav drive I was using did not have a port side attachment point for the engine. So I had to come up with an alternative means to have that engine attached to the ship. At first I thought I should try moving some brackets around, because I like using those Nova bracers to attach various equipment to the ship, and I was having some success with that, but then I realized it might be easier if I simply eliminated the bracers and moved the engines up, because I could simply attach the engines to the HE3 tanks and not use bracers at all. So I decided to just get rid of the attachment points that were offered by the bracers and move the engines forward. So I had a little bit of a different layout than I expected, but this is sort of the joy of building ships. You end up with something that is perhaps not exactly what you had planned. Now we come to painting the ship. Initially I was going to make this a gray wolf, but I thought about landing a gray ship on a gray planet and realized it would be difficult to find that ship from far away if I just simply wanted to find it. So I decided to go with a gold color, because gold is a lot easier to see when you're on a planet. The last step was to make a couple of tweaks that I only found once I had visited the inside of the ship. I swapped the location of the shield generator and the docker, and the location of the all-in-one berth and the Nova Galactic captain's quarters. And now we have the finished ship. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe. My name is Richard, and I will see you in the Starfield.